So this class is class number 13 in the Jewish philosophy course. It's regarding the power of speech. How much does speech really matter or make a difference? So I'll start off with a book that was written by a Japanese professor. He's a researcher, and I believe they translated it into English as well. It's called, I believe, Messages from Water. He writes in this book that he made studies where he had water in a room, and he asked the students in the room, 500 students, to share words of compliments, praise, positive words, good energy. Then he took another cup of water and he had students share negative words, share not such nice compliments, share bad feedback, curse words, things that are not positive energy, but could be the contrary. They take this water, they freeze it a special way, and then under a microscope, they take pictures of the particles of water. They separate the drops of water into different testing tubes, and they show the photos of the difference between the drops of water that were in a good energy. They look beautiful photos. They look really nice. The ones that were said in a room that weren't saying good, nice words, those drops of water didn't have a beautiful image. I'll pull up over here a short clip. I didn't prepare it before to have it on the screen, but let me see if I can pull it up a second. Okay, maybe I'll pull it up soon. That idea that the way a person speaks affects his surrounding is something that back in the day we would think is a myth. Back in the day, people wouldn't believe it. They would say it's not true. It cannot be that what I say actually makes a difference. Judaism tells us how much that's not true, how much the words we say actually influence the surrounding that we're in. It changes the entire existence of our life and then the world in general. For example, in Judaism, there's something called Chanukat Habayit, which means when you purchase a new home or move into a new home or build a new home, you make a special celebration where people come and study Torah. Why is that? Because in the home, you want to have a foundation of positive Judaism, positive influence of holiness into the home. And once you start the home on that foundation, it allows for good energy to be in that home. The way a person speaks actually has influence, changes, which is why Jewish law prohibits parents that want to sometimes get their children a little scared to behave properly. They'll say, if you don't go to bed, a dog will come and bite you, or a robber will come and snatch you. It sounds cute and funny for the adults, but bottom line, Jewish law says that speaking negatively in such a way can actually have an impact and make it that possibly that will happen. It's possible that you're bringing a curse upon such a person, and it actually has the power to change the person's destiny, and it'll end up being something negative. We find it so too in the positive. When Abraham went to bring Isaac up on the altar, he tells his servants, we will go bow down and return to you. The Medrash says that because he said, we will return to you, therefore it happened that they both returned alive. If he wouldn't use that phrase, we will return, but rather I will return, the singular, because he thought he was going to sacrifice his son, then not necessarily would they both return. Showing us the power of how much it's important to use positive words when we can, and even more so, it starts with a step prior. Judaism teaches us that because words are so powerful, silence is so valued. As the Talmud gives a phrase that a word is worth 1 coin, being silent is worth 2. Because to speak is always easier than to be quiet. A person must ask themselves, is a response requested and required here, or is it not? If it's not necessary for someone to respond, keeping our mouths shut would actually be a lot more beneficial. We think we're being smarter and helping ourselves when we're speaking, which a lot of times we're ruining it more than we're helping it. So we'll use an easy example of when someone is upset, someone is frustrated and angry. We sometimes feel like I need to let out to the other person and tell them how miserable and how terrible they are and how awful it was. And we want to let out our steam and feel like we're making ourselves happier by making them feel bad as well. That is actually not being helpful. That's bringing negative energy into our lives instead of us controlling ourselves and being quiet. One of the beautiful phrases that are given in a positive sense, we won't focus so much on the negative, how it speaks bad about when one doesn't control their speech. But it says if a person can just one time hold themselves back from saying something negative that they wanted to share, the light that shines upon them is greater than the light that can shine upon any angel. Because as much as an angel tries, he doesn't have the ability to challenge himself of holding himself back from not sharing something he wanted to share. We have that opportunity because the power of speech is so powerful for the good, and then same thing for the negative. We think I'm just making myself a little more calm by letting out negative speech about someone else, where we're actually ultimately destroying something. We're causing an extreme negative reaction in the world to happen because of that. They even made a similar study. This was actually something in Israel where they took ear from a room that they collected, where they had people have something positive done in the room. They were saying Tehillim, they were saying Book of Psalms, praises to God. And then they took ear from a room where they had negative things going on. It was a sad time. I believe it was from a funeral or from a Shiva house. And then they took this ear like in a pouch, and then they gave it to people to inhale. And they asked the people afterwards, how did you feel when you inhaled this ear? And overall, those that inhaled the ear that was from a positive place said they felt a sense of relaxation, a sense of joy. And those that inhaled the ear from a negative place said that they sensed a fear, they sensed instability, a depression of that sort. So it sounds mystical, it sounds something non-believable back in the day, but the more science comes to develop itself, as we mentioned in the beginning from the scientist that made his research regarding the water, we see how even science can come to the conclusion that the area which we are around has an effect. There's a verse, the first book of Psalms, King David says, Uve moshav leitzim lo yashav. I didn't sit amongst the gossipers, the ones that are laughing, mocking everything, those that are evil talkers, I didn't sit among them. Now, the terms that's used is moshav leitzim, means I didn't sit in the place where they sit. So the Talmud asks, why does it say I didn't sit in the place where they sat? It should say I didn't sit with them. Meaning, what's wrong with sitting in the place that they sat if they're not there? Yes, I can understand you say don't hang around a bad group. But if they left this place, they normally sit on this end, this corner, 46th Street and 15th Avenue, and today they're not there, and I just sit there. What's wrong with that? So the rabbis answer that what King David is hinting to is that not just is it bad to be around them, but the energy in a place that was done negative things, a person can feel like this is not a positive energy place. There's a story with the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of the Hasidic movement. He came to a synagogue and he said, I cannot come into the synagogue. And they asked him, why not? He said, because the prayers in the synagogue were not said appropriately. And I feel the energy in this place that it's not a proper place. I want to go to a synagogue where things were done properly, because I can tap in to what type of environment a person is in. It shows us the power of energy, the power of speech, the power of when someone talks and says a certain thing, how it actually has an effect. A lot of times someone is upset at someone else. So besides for not sharing things that are negative, not getting angry at them, not blowing up, but controlling ourselves and say, for God, I'm going to stop myself from saying something bad about them. Even more so, sometimes people will say, you know what? I'm not going to say anything bad about them, but God will take care of him. Let God punish him. Let God, a lot of times you'll hear maybe Israelis, if you're familiar with them, it's their way of cursing someone without having to curse them themselves. They say, Elokim yanishoto, God should punish him. God will take care of him. that is too is also negative speech, because even though you're not saying anything negative, but you're saying God should, the Talmud says that when one asks God to judge someone, the first thing God does is he judges you. He says, okay, you're asking to open up a book, you're asking to open up a case. Let's first look at your case. Let's see how much are you worthy, and then we'll move on to someone else. So by speaking negatively about someone, even asking God to do it, is actually end up speaking negative about ourselves. It's going to cause judgment on ourselves. That's why there's a Yiddish phrase that says, Oi, soll sein gebenched, which means I'm upset at the guy, but he should be blessed. It's a way of saying I'm really upset at him, but I don't want to bring it down in a negative term. I want to always speak in a positive tone. I always want to bring positive energy, and therefore I'll say God should bless him. Instead of saying it in a way of a curse, say it in a way of a blessing. Bring it upon him, a good thing, and then God will be able to bring blessing upon you as well. One last point as an introduction, the Talmud quotes a verse from Psalms where King David says, "Mipi oilim v'yankim yisadet ha'ois," which means because of the mouth of children that study the Torah, you put the foundation of the world. And the Talmud explains that our world stands on the merit of the pure mouths of children when they study Torah. Because even adults, when they study Torah, since adults have sinned, they've done other things as well, because there's no man that's perfect. Their study is not as pure as an innocent child which studies Torah. That energy allows the world to continue, literally the world continue to exist, which is interesting from the book that we mentioned earlier, Messages from Water, from that professor from Japan. He mentions, based on his whole theories and testing, that he believes the world was created through speech. The speech is so powerful that the world was created through speech, which aligns very much with Judaism, which we say that God said, let the world be, let there be light. The world should exist, and the world came into being. So it shows us the power that as much as we think, oh, I just said it, whether it's for the positive or for the negative, whether it's keeping a promise or breaking our commitment, Judaism so much focuses on never promise something, because just in case you cannot keep it, don't make a promise. If you promise something, keep it. As there was a father that was once passing away, he tells his son before he passed on, he said, son, I want to teach you 2 rules in business. The first rule is whatever you promise, you must keep. Never break your promise. The second rule is never promise anything. What he was telling his son is, once you make a promise, once you give your word, you make a commitment, you must keep it. But you were never required to make any commitments, meaning never say things that you will have to fulfill if you don't know if you can fulfill them. Always say, I will try, I'll work on it, I'll make it happen. But a person shouldn't get used to always saying, I promise, I swear. But in the name of my mother, some people, they're growing up with that type of attitude. And it's not their fault. That's just the way, the expressions they're used to. And everything by them is, I promise, I swear. Which, number one, makes someone think that whenever you don't say, I promise, I swear, you're lying. But number two, we should never promise, because things they know the best, I won't be there. So just a promise, I'll be there 4 o'clock. Or without a promise, I'll buy you this, or I'll get you that, or I'll refund that. Whatever it is that we do, we should never promise or swear, because it has such a strong effect if we don't do it, that it can be extremely catastrophic. There's a sad story, which I'll share. I just reminded myself that Medrash gives a sad story that there was a woman that had a neighbor come over to her and say, can you please watch for me a gold coin? She gives her a gold coin and she says, guard it for me, I'll be back soon. So the woman takes the gold coin, and she was looking for a place to hide it. So she put it into her bowl of flour. She was busy then. She said, I'll put it there, I'll take it out later. A little while later, she had to make some bread, and she was selling bread in the market. She forgot that the gold coin was there, it was really small. So she kneads this flour and water together, and she forgot that in this loaf of bread, there's now a gold coin. She missed it even with all her mixing. She went to the marketplace, she sold it. And then a few days later, her neighbor comes back and says, "Can I please have back my coin?" So the woman tells her neighbor, she says, "I really don't know where your coin is. I'm really sorry. I don't remember where I put it. And I promise you that I didn't steal it and I didn't benefit from it." She says, "I promise you I didn't benefit from it. And not only that, to show you how much I seriously mean it, if I did benefit from your coin, my oldest son should die." She was trying to give over with such affirmation that I'm serious. I'm willing to curse myself in order to prove to you that I didn't benefit from your coin. And the medrash continues that sadly, a few days later, her oldest son died. And the whole community was starting to gossip. They said, "Oh, this woman said a curse, and all of a sudden her son died. Must be that she's a liar. Must be she did benefit from the coin." So everybody's gossiping about it, and this woman feels really offended. She knew that she did not steal the coin. She knew she didn't benefit from it. She didn't remember what happened to it, but she said, "I definitely didn't benefit from it." So she stands up after the funeral, and in front of the whole town, she says, "I'm so sure that I didn't benefit from this coin. I promise that my son didn't die because I lied and I did benefit from this coin. And if," she says, "I'm lying to you, my second son should die because I'm so sure I didn't steal this coin and I didn't benefit from it. And must be that my first son died for another reason." A few days later, her second son passed away. And the rabbi said, "This is crazy. Something's wrong, because no woman that really stole the money and sees that one son died would make a promise that her second son should die, and she sees the second one died. There's something wrong." So they made an investigation and research, and they asked her, and they finally, with all their detective work, they found out what happened. Someone in the market said, "Yes, I bought a loaf from her, and there was a gold coin in there, and I just didn't say anything because I figured, why not? A free loaf, a free gold coin." So they made this investigation, and they realized that she said, "I didn't benefit from your coin. If I didn't benefit from it, my son should die." But she did benefit, even though she didn't benefit the full value of the gold coin. But she was selling her loaf of bread based on the weight, let's say a kilo, and the gold coin took up a few grams of weight. Those few grams of what the gold coin took up in the flour, in the loaf, she saved on flour that she had in her house. She didn't have to use another few drops of flour and water because of the gold coin. So even though she benefited from the coin a few cents, but there was some benefit, and therefore her curse was effective. And the Talmud uses this story as teaching us not to say negative things about ourselves, even if we're positive, that we're sure we're right. "I promise that I didn't say that, or I didn't do it." Maybe you're making a mistake. Maybe you don't know. And even if you do know in this case, don't get yourself used to saying things that are a curse, that are bringing negativity upon yourself, whether it's sharing something negative about someone or cursing or saying God should curse them. Our tongue and our mouth has such power that we have to use it wisely. Let's start with reading the overview of the class on Steiny. If you'd like to read over here, it's on page 282 in the book.
The power of speech. Humans, unlike any other creation, are endowed with the ability to build goodness and kindness in the world through our words. Our speech has so much power that words alone can build something or tear it down. Speech is the tool of creation. Speech is what defines us as human beings. How we speak determines the type of human beings that we are.
Very good. Okay, so moving on to the next. And Elia, if you'd like to read over here, we'll get back to the key points after. Read the introduction, Elia, please.
How often have you responded angrily or impetuously, and then wished you could snatch your words back? How often have you had to apologize when it would have been so much easier had you just kept quiet? On the other hand, how often have you held your tongue instead of replying, then realized that not answering saved you from an unfortunate scene?
Yeah. So this is food for thought. We're helping ourselves by holding back our mouths, keeping our thoughts to ourselves, and not feel that by letting out a lot of negativity from our mouth, we're actually making our lives better. Let's see over here the first time we'll start from the quotes from the Torah. And Layla, if you'd like to read over here, whatever you see on the screen here.
Uniquely human. Speech is a defining characteristic of the human being. The ability to express concepts, ideas, emotions, philosophy, and meaning through words is exclusively human. Should I continue?
Yeah, continue, yeah.
Humans are characterized by their ability to speak. And the Lord God formed the human, dust from the earth, and he breathed into the nostrils and the soul of life, and the human became a living soul.
Yeah.
Translation.
Right, and read the Aramaic translation.
And the human became a speaking soul.
So when it describes the creation of man, God defines something uniquely human about him, that he has a living soul. The Targum Onkelos, which was written by a man named Onkelos, but it's considered in rabbinic tradition as a divine inspiration of a translation as well as explanation of the Torah. He defines it as, what does it mean, a living soul? He says it's a speaking soul, something unique that humans have, that we speak. We have the ability to communicate, and we'll explain in detail in this class what exactly do we mean by the gift of speaking. What does that include? What does that entail? How much does it help us? But that is something uniquely human, something that we were given by God for a purpose, for a reason. So going up a little bit, we'll have here the question. The Torah divides, you could divide the categories of what was created into 4 categories. The first category are immobile objects, such as dirt, water, which doesn't move on its own, stones, sand. Then you have items that grow, but they don't move. So for example, trees, plants, fruits, and vegetables. The third category are things that grow and they move. So for example, animals. And then the fourth category are the humans. The humans are another category. We're not an animal that's just a little bit more developed. Of course, some people will say, well, there's you have the monkey, the chimpanzee, and you have the human, which is just a little bit of a developed monkey. We don't believe it. We believe that there was a separate category that God created called humans, which have a unique gift. Within the animals, there are some that are more like humans than others, but we're not just a little bit more of a sophisticated monkey. We have something a lot more to us. And that starts with the idea of speech, which has a gift for us of what we can do specifically through speech. And it doesn't mean, of course, that if someone cannot speak, they're not a complete human. It's in general, humans benefit from the idea of speech. And even those that maybe cannot speak, they benefit the fact that others can speak and they're part of that society. And Sheila, if you'd like to read this box over here.
I can't read the other thing. Oh, wait.
Let me zoom in a little
Is
more.
this the best way to characterize the uniqueness of a human being?
Yeah. So the question is, why do you think that human beings is characterized by the ability to speak? So let's read over here on the next source. And Stein, if you'd like to read over here, this is from the Shalah, Shnei Luchos Habris, a rabbi that lived about 500 years ago.
Speech reflects higher intelligence. Rabbi Isaiah Halevi Horowitz, Shnei Luchos. Okay, you said that. In Parshas Matot, the Torah deals with laws designed to perfect our souls, our spiritual development. The laws dealing with vows contain the warning to honor all our utterances. One must carry out all the that crosses one's lips. Numbers 34. This is addressed to the soul because the power of speech derives from the attribute of wisdom, which itself is an outgrowth of the soul. Speech is only an externalized version of one's thoughts, something that elevates human beings above all other living creatures. The human is called a talking creature.
right? So to put it simply, speech is a unique attribute because speech reflects higher intelligence. Animal intelligence is primarily about survival. They'll use their brains in order to continue surviving in a better way. For example, where to find food, how to escape a predator. But man, however, uses words to ponder, to communicate, and express concepts, ideas, emotions, philosophy, and meaning in life. We use speech beyond just our own survival. So that's, for starters, that it's something unique to humans. Humans were given this gift for a reason. Let's move on to the second point about speech, the gift of speech, which is something that others don't have as much as we have. Animals don't write love letters. They cannot express books of affection, or they cannot write cards to one another. This is a gift that humans have. Starting with Elia, if you'd like to read here. B, communication.
Communication. The primary purpose of speech is to communicate. This means to reach out beyond our own existence and communicate with another. If the quality of speech is that it reveals intelligence, why don't we simply refer to the human as a maskil, intelligent being, or something of the sort? Why are we called medaber? Speeches, do I read like the text on the picture?
Yeah, yes, please.
Speech is not just a defining feature of humans, it's the defining feature of humans. What is so special about the quality of human speech that it surpasses the quality of intelligence? Let us better understand the nature of speech. Would you need speech if you were stranded on an island?
So the question is, the gift of speech definitely helps us with communication. If someone were stranded on an island, like we read here, would we need speech? Would it help us? Would we need to talk to anyone? It's not something that is as necessary as much as we can use it to communicate with someone else. Communication, by definition, means communication to someone else. The first thing a person has to think about before communicating is, who am I talking to? Let's read here the next quote. And Layla, if you'd like to read over here this quote.
Speech is an expression of our soul. The spiritual and unmolded nature of a person that is due to his intelligence is still a part of his own being, whereas the power of speech, since the person is not bound by his own existence and he can communicate with another, this expresses the true spiritual and unmolded nature of the soul. Intelligence is certainly an admirable quality, but it is still only another part of our own limited existence. Communication, on the other hand, is the ability to reach beyond our own existence.
So here he's explaining the value of speech over even thought. Thought has its own values, which we're not discussing now, that's true. But speech gives us the ability to communicate, to connect with someone else. With your mind, you cannot communicate or connect. And as much as your mind is really powerful, it's all within yourself. Speech allows you to tap in, connect multiple people's advice, multiple people's ideas into one. Animals primarily communicate even with their own noises that they make from their mouth. It's mostly about their own existence. I'm hungry, I need a mate, I need to do something, I need to catch that animal. Their communication is essentially just a larger extension of self, versus humans have the ability to not just talk at people. We don't just scream and make noises to another person, but we communicate with people. The true communication is when we take into consideration the other's existence. Make space for them and mold out our words and expressions to communicate with them. That is the idea of the gift of speech that humans specifically were given. It allows us to go beyond our own existence. The third point about creation, and Layla, if you'd like to, Sheila, if you'd like to read C.
With our speech, we can build up and tear down another, just like God. uses words to create the entire existence.
Okay, and continue with these two boxes. Yeah.
Oh. With speech, God created, and God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. Shall I read the rest?
Yeah, and the next one,
Okay.
yes.
Blessed is the one who spoke and the world was created. Blessed is he. Blessed is the creator of the universe. Blessed is the one who speaks and acts. Blessed is the one who decrees and fulfills decrees.
Yeah, so here we have God made us in his image. How did God create the world? By speech. And God says, I give you the ability to use speech as well. As we mentioned in the past, God uses us as our partners, as his partners in the world. So God created the world, and he said there's still more that needs to get done, and I need the humans to do it. How are they going to do it? I will give them the gift of speech. He didn't give it to the animals because the animals don't need the ability of speech to create anything because they are here to serve the humans. Since humans have a task, God says they need to speak in order to do just as I did. They need to finish creating, and they have the ability to build someone up or completely destroy someone just with the power of their speech. How many wars were started and how many millions of lives were lost because people spoke the wrong way? They said the wrong thing. They threatened the wrong way. They wanted to boost their ego too much, and therefore it caused mass destruction. As much as an animal can do, he cannot speak and get a world war of animals together where everybody, millions of animals team up against other millions of animals. He cares for himself, and that's it. The speech communicating with someone else allows masses to join forces in one idea, but it could either be for the good, everybody should work on doing something positive, or it can be, unfortunately, like has happened sometimes, for the negative, that millions of people join forces to become a Nazi regime or to become another form of abusive power, but it's all with the power of speech. And God says, you can create like me, but you can choose how you want to use that power of creation. So we think of speech as, if I did something with my hands, I created something that I can see, then I did something. If I hurt someone physically, I hurt them. But if I just told them a sharp word, I didn't do anything bad. But to a certain degree, speech is more powerful than action. Speech is something that allows to reach a deeper connection with someone else than just action can do. On the next page, Elia, if you'd like to read at the time.
At the time of creation, God used speech to create. As stated earlier, speech is the power to go beyond your own being, make room for another, and communicate with the other. In the case of God, he did not communicate with the other, but he actually communicated the other into being. God's speech formed beings that appear as if they are other to his existence. God did not communicate with the other, but he actually communicated the other.
So this is just an important distinction, not to think of ourselves completely as God. We have to understand God allowed us to communicate once there was another. When God communicated, there was no other. God's communication created another. By him talking, we came into existence. By us talking, we're working with someone that already is in existence. But to the most degree possible, God gave us that ability that our speech can have a big influence. And we mentioned it before. Let me pull it up over here now again. I have the video here. So this is the video I mentioned before of, this is the Japanese professor. You should be able to see that on your screen. Let me know if you don't see it. So the Japanese professor, his name is Amoto Masuro or Masuro, something along that line. This is written in Hebrew. And this is the test that they made where they took droplets, as we mentioned before, and had good words said with them and bad words said with them. And here you see, these are the images of the drops of water where they had good words said. It looks beautiful. It looks like a nice design. Here you have that as well. And then they'll pull up over here the next picture. This is with the ones that they have where they took tests and it wasn't nice words said about it. So you can Google it. You'll check out, he has a book about it. But that idea, we don't base it just on him, but it just shows us how even in science, you can come to this idea where the power of speech can actually change an environment. It can change it to be a positive influence or a negative influence. We'll read over here again another verse in Psalms, which brings out this point. And Sheila, if you'd like to read Psalms chapter 8, verse 6 and 7.
What is man that you are mindful of him, and the son of man that you visit him? For you have made him a little lower than the angels, and have crowned him with glory and honor. You made him to have dominion over the words of your hand. You have put all things under his feet.
Okay. So while we are not God, we cannot literally create something from nothing. But with our speech, God made us dominion over the works. Like we said in this verse, God allowed us to control and rule the other creations that he has made, and he has placed everything under our feet. By what force do we have the power to manipulate creation? By the same force that God used to create creation, which is the power of speech. By that force, we are able to control, we are able to be of a higher caliber, a higher level, which tells us that if we don't use our speech appropriately, meaning even if you're speaking the English language and you're mixing letters together, but your talk is like a bark, your talk is like the way animals communicate, you just get as angry as them and you let out your frustration just like them, in what way are you better? Yes, you maybe walk on 2 feet and they walk on 3 feet, or you walk on 2 and they walk on 3 or 4, but bottom line, if you're acting like them, then you're not better than them. This shows us how we have to have that ability to use the power, the gifts that God gives us in order to see the possibilities that he wants us to accomplish. I'll show you here. Let me pull up this screen. You have here a website where you should be able to see a picture over here in the middle. And it shows you a beautiful scene of a mountain with the sky. Now, if you notice over here, it gives you the possibility of changing the pixels. So if you want to change it to just be 25, or if you want to change it to be 100, as you change it, if you notice, the picture is changing, as well as the code on the bottom. Notice that the code on the bottom is changing as well. If you put in, as you change your numbers, the code on how this picture is made changes. This is an illustration where you can see how words can actually change something. The way something is written, we don't see the back end because we're usually not dealing with it. But the way something was set up, just by changing the coding, changes the way you experience something. So too in this world, changing the words, changing the way we express, if we're speaking positively and we're behaving appropriately, it actually changes the perception of the world. It actually changes the way the world behaves. You could blow it up and make it into a nicer, larger picture, or really small, just by changing the code, which is, in our version, the words that one speaks changes the experience that we have in the world. And Layla, if you'd like to read over here this source, this is from the Talmud. So start with what we say.
I can only see the image location.
Oh, sorry. I forgot to
It's okay.
change screens there. Okay. Okay. So this and then the following box as well.
Okay. What we say to or about another person can make all the difference to how they see themselves and how they are perceived by others. This means our words can shape our own life experience and that of those around us. The tongue has the power for life or death. Rabbi Chama, son of Rabbi Hanina, says, "What is the meaning of that which is written? Death and life are in the hand of the tongue. Does the tongue have a hand? To tell you that just as a hand can kill, so too a tongue can kill. If you were to claim that just as the hand kills only from close by, so too the tongue kills only from close by. Therefore, the verse states, their tongue is a sharpened arrow. The tongue kills like an arrow that is fired from a bow at a great distance. If you say that just as an arrow can only kill within the distance it can be shot, which is up to about 40 or 50 cubits, so too a tongue can kill only from up to 40 or 50 cubits. Therefore, the verse teaches, they have set their mouth against the heavens, and their tongue walks through the earth. This teaches that malicious speech can reach great distances, even the distance between heaven and earth.
Yes. So in short, to make it clear, what the Talmud is saying here is expounding a verse from King Solomon. He says that life and death is in the hands of the tongue, but he says it's even worse than someone's hands. The tongue is more powerful because hands can only kill either in a close distance or can throw an arrow a certain limited distance, 40, 50 feet, or even if you have a gun, you can only shoot so much. Versus the tongue can destroy miles away, centuries away. It can destroy forever because when someone teaches the wrong thing, gives over the wrong message, destroys someone's image on themselves, they let out their anger, their frustration, it has limitless effect for the negative, but how much more so also for the positive. If you were imagine you were a teacher in a preschool and one of your students was Adolf Hitler, and you were a teacher that was really positive into teaching the children having the right values of life. And you taught him about believing in God and how every life is valuable. And you had an influence on him he wasn't already a dictator and a leader. He was just a little boy, 4 years old. And you changed his opinion without realizing that this guy could have been the next ruler that would cause millions, literally not just Jews, but millions of all types of people to die and perish and lose their lives and livelihood and destroy humankind the way we know it. Till today, there's people that are traumatized. You wouldn't even notice that you changed destiny of the future because you wouldn't find out that you changed someone that could have been a dictator. You changed his opinion because all the people that you change their opinion, they don't become famous because they don't become a dictator, and then they just live a happy life. You don't realize the power of influence, how much you changed. Meaning, how many times were there dictators that could have been such destructive forces, but someone in their life believed in them, told them a positive word, gave them a good influence, and they didn't do what they could have been doing. We just don't know about it because we only find out the negative. We only find those that failed. But it teaches us the power of speech, how you could just influence one person and how much that can change for years to come. Look at Abraham. He started off as one person believing in God, and today we're in a world where most of the world believes in God. A God, not a God of idols. Most people in the world believe in a higher power. Everybody has a different definition of how exactly they translate it. But if you look in a general term, believing in an existence of a higher power, most of the world today believes in it. So it shows us the power that one has with their tongue. Let's look at some negative impact that someone can have. We'll use it from a story that happened lately. Here we have a clip of this video. Oh, sorry.
Justine Sacco should center of a digital uproar. Of all people, Justine Sacco should have known better. She's a PR hotshot of sorts, but Friday, before boarding a flight to South Africa, she sent out an incredibly offensive tweet about AIDS and race. By the time she landed yesterday, that tweet had gone global and she had been fired. ABC's Gio Benitez is on the story. Gio.
Good morning, Dan. Up until a few days ago, she was repping big websites like Match.com and the Daily Beast. Now she's unemployed. So many watching her demise online while she, offline, was on a plane. This morning, Justine Sacco is without a job, fired after sparking an international controversy. Her peril began the moment she tweeted this: going to Africa. Hope I don't get AIDS. Just kidding, I'm white. After the nearly immediate outrage on Friday, her former employer, internet giant IAC, quickly issued a statement calling the comment outrageous and offensive. And after firing Sacco on Saturday, again said it condemns the tweet, but said she is an individual who we have otherwise known to be a decent person at core. Sacco apparently oblivious to the rising backlash. Without Wi-Fi during the nearly 12-hour flight from London to Cape Town, South Africa Friday. The whole time, her Twitter account exploding, her reputation imploding. Online critics launched the hashtag, "Has Justine landed yet?" Anxiously awaiting the moment Sacco would get online and perhaps discover at last the severity of the response.
This is one of the fastest responses and crash and burns I've ever seen from a tweet.
This photo, posted to Twitter shortly after Sacco did land, reportedly shows her in the Cape Town airport, on the phone, wearing glasses. Moments later, the offending tweet was deleted, then her entire account. But still, no apology from the woman once responsible for the image of some of the biggest names on the internet: Match.com, OkCupid, About.com, even the Daily Beast.
A PR person has two jobs. One is certainly to present things to the public, but the other is to read the mood of the public and really be sensitive to that. And this was shockingly insensitive.
Her family tells ABC News this is not indicative of the type of person she is. But on Sacco's now deleted account, she described herself as a troublemaker on the side and known for my loud laugh. Sacco is expected to make a statement very soon. She hasn't said a thing publicly since sending out that tweet, Dan and Beyond, and clearly a lot of people want to hear from her.
Yeah, and she allegedly had some questionable tweets.
Okay, so this is just an idea where we see that the power of someone's speech can have on so many people, the fact that it can change her life. But imagine when someone can do something for the positive, in a positive light, where someone can say something that can help others, can change the world. A person's life is in the hands of their tongue, of what they communicate. We're using tongue in a general term here as their communication with others. Let's read a parable. It's a little bit of a lengthy parable. And Steini, if you'd like to read it over here, it should pull up on the screen now. This is by the Dubna Magid.
A Persian king was sick, and his doctors told him his only cure was to drink the milk of a lioness. One man offered to procure the drink if the king would give him 10 goats. He went out to the wilderness and discovered a lioness and her cubs. The first day he stood at a distance and sent her one goat. She ate it. The second day he got a little closer to her and sent another goat for her to eat. He did this every day, getting closer and closer until she allowed him to get close enough to milk her. Milk in hand, he started back to the palace, stopping to rest along the way. While he slept, he dreamt that his limbs were fighting with each other, each claiming to be the most crucial to the mission. The feet said, "Among all the limbs, there's no one like us. If we didn't walk, there would have been no way to take the milk." The hand said, "There's none like us. If we didn't do our work, there would be no milk." The heart said, "If I didn't give a plan, of what use would you have all been?" The tongue spoke, "If I didn't speak up to the king, what would there have been to do?" All the limbs answered the tongue, "How can you compare yourself to us? You're in a dark place. You didn't plan or execute any of the mission. Today you will say that I rule over you," the tongue responded. The man brought the milk before the king and said, "My lord king, I have brought you the milk of a dog." The king became furious and ordered that he be hanged. He sat in the king's dungeon. As he sat in the king's dungeon, he fell asleep and once again dreamt of his limbs. This time, they were weeping at their upcoming fate. The tongue said to them, "Didn't I tell you that your power is nothing compared to mine? If I save you, will you acknowledge I'm more important than you?" "Yes," all the limbs answered. The man awoke and said to the hangman, "Return me to the king. Perhaps I can save him." He was brought to the king and he asked, "Why did you command that I be hanged?" The king said to him, "You have brought me a dog's milk. This milk will cure you." The word for the lioness and dog are similar, and I misspoke, the man said. They took a sample of it, tested it, and found it to be the lioness's milk. Then the limb said to the tongue, "Behold, we kneel to you." And so it's written, "Death and life are in the power of the tongue." Mishlei, Proverbs 18:21.
Very good. So here's a story bringing out how what everything else the body can do, the tongue ultimately is the way we give over our message. Of everything that we worked hard to communicate, as the saying goes, that some people light
I
travels
can't hear
fast.
you.
Oh, am I on mute? Can you hear me now?
Hello?
Or Steiny, can you hear me?
Yes,
can't
I hear
hear
you.
Oh,
I don't
so,
know about anyone else.
I
don't hear
also
you.
hear you.
oh, okay. So Sheila, maybe your
Very, very slightly.
maybe your thing has an issue. Maybe there's an
Maybe.
issue. Yeah, maybe with your volume or something. Maybe if you want to
I don't know
try.
what to do with it.
Right. Do you want to try to log out and log back in? Right. Let me.
It's all managed.
Oh, can you hear now?
The same. It's okay. Just go ahead. I'll keep it closer to my ear.
Okay. So everything that we do with other parts of our body, only our tongue can give over our culmination of everything to the other person. So the tongue is really the gateway that allows us to use every other aspect to move on. So therefore, the tongue is extremely powerful as much as we feel like it doesn't make a difference, which is why Judaism has laws different than American laws. American laws say you have the freedom of speech. You can say whatever you want, whenever you want, to whomever you want. Judaism doesn't say you can say whatever you want, because just as we don't allow you to do whatever you want, which American society also doesn't allow you to do whatever you want, Judaism understands that your speech also is just as effective as your action. And we don't allow you to do things that are harmful, which is why Judaism says you cannot gossip. In secular law, you could gossip about someone. You cannot make up a story if you're harming them, but gossip doesn't mean you're making up a story. Gossip means you're sharing negative information about someone. Why does the Torah prohibit it? Because it says it's just as harmful sharing negative information about someone. You cannot curse someone in Judaism. You cannot curse another Jew. You cannot curse the judge. You cannot curse God. It's a prohibition to curse God. And you might say, well, what do you mean? Freedom of speech? I could do what I want. Just as there's no freedom of action because it has an effect, speech has just as much of an effect. Let's read over here some of the laws in Judaism regarding speech. And Layla, if you'd like to read here on the top of page 294, 9 and 10, gossip can kill.
Gossip can kill. A person who collects gossip about a colleague violates a prohibition, as Leviticus 19:16 states. Do not go around gossiping among your people. Even though this transgression is not punished by lashes, it is a severe sin and can cause the death of many Jews. Therefore, the warning, "Do not stand still over your neighbor's blood," is placed next to it in the Torah. See what happened because of Doeg the Edomite.
So what this is referring to is there was a guy called Doeg. He lived in the times of King Saul and King David, and he just passed on information that a certain town helped King David when King David was running away from the current king, King Saul. Because of that, King Saul went to that town and wiped out the entire town. He killed everyone. So he was just sharing information, and because of that, many tens of people, dozens of people were killed. We learn from there, not only is it prohibited, and the Torah prohibits to share negative information, even too much information is considered a bad trait and is prohibited. Meaning, someone shouldn't go around and say, oh, did you see what type of car that person bought? Did you see what type of vacation they did? Did you see where he works? Don't talk about another person unless you're looking to compliment them. If you're looking to share something positive about them, great. But just to gossip about people, as the saying goes, high-class people speak about ideas, middle-class people speak about events, and low-class people speak about people. The Torah tells us, even if you're not making up a story, meaning there's 3 prohibitions in the Torah. Don't make up false lies about another. Number 2, even if it's true, if it's negative, don't share it. Number 3, even if it's not negative, even if you're just sharing Yenteschaft about what everybody else is doing, who bought what and who bought another and who goes on vacation here and who went on vacation there, that also is not a positive trait, because the speech has a great power. And it says when something is hidden from others' eyes, it has a blessing. When too many people know about something, there is no blessing, which is why people won't share if something was really successful, because you don't want to have an evil eye on that blessing, which might take it away. We'll read over here a similar quote. Elia, if you'd like to read.
Okay. The subject here deals with 4 different worlds, named the world of emanation, creation, formation, and action, respectively. In each of these worlds, there are life and God forbid its opposite. We in our world of action, a domain representing the physical material world after it has been completed, experience both life and, God forbid, its opposite, death. Similarly, we can visualize life and death in the world of formation, which, for want of a better term, we could call the world of speech, seeing that according to the Torah and God had created it with the verbal directives. When man abuses the power of speech, uttering vain things or lies, he is perceived of killing life in that domain. When man employs the power of speech constructively, is considered as giving life to the domain. This condition is alluded to by Solomon in Proverbs 18:21, where he wrote, "Life and death are within the power of one's tongue."
Very good. So he says that in the spiritual worlds as well, just like we have in the physical world life and death, in the world of speech, there's life and death. You can literally kill or build up, create, and form new life with the power of the tongue. So what a person says is extremely important. There's a beautiful video. Let me pull this up over here on the screen, which really brings out this point.
There is a story of a Major League Baseball player who's speaking to inmates in prison. One of the inmates asks him, "How did you become a professional ball player, sir?" To which he says, I think it started when I was a boy. I would play catch with my dad, and he would always say, you keep throwing the ball like that, son, and you'll end up in the major leagues one day. You keep swinging the bat like that, son, and you'll end up in the major leagues one day." And here I am, a professional ball player. The room became quiet. And the inmate who asked the question, he said, the same thing happened to me. When I was a boy, my father told me that I was good for nothing, and that one day I would end up in prison. And here I am. Sticks and stones can break my bones, but words can never hurt me wrong. See, words can cut deeper and fester longer than any sword known to man.
So the idea of that video, you have a lot of times parents which will say regarding this child or that child, "Oh, he's such a nudnik," or "He's so unappreciative, he's so wild, he's so annoying, so dumb." And then they wonder why their child is keeping their prophecy fulfilled. And you tell yourself, well, you start telling your child this is who he is, and he'll start becoming that, because he's just a child. He doesn't have the ability to think outside of the box and say, "Oh, my parent is trying to say it in a positive way." They think of it as, my parent is telling me who I am, and then of course I'll live up to it, not in a sense of trying to let them be broken. I don't want to disappoint them. I'm just fulfilling what I'm being told, and this is the way I start believing in myself. It's extremely important when someone communicates with someone, it's not about lying, but it's about seeing the beauty in every person and always being able to share something positive. You can go somewhere, and in every situation in life, there's always going to be a positive feedback and a negative feedback. And the choice of how you perceive it, which we spoke about in other classes, is in your hands. And the choice of how you communicate about it to other people is within your hands. You can communicate negatively, share with your mouth opening up something bad, or you can say, I choose to share and bring out the light, bring out the brightness that there is in this situation. Let's read over here again, a little bit of a scarier type of story, but it brings out the point similar to what we mentioned before. And Sheila, if you'd like to read this story.
In Mez Hibaz, the hometown of Rabbi Israel Baal Shem Tov, founder of the Hasidim 1698, 1760, two local residents were involved in a bitter dispute. One day they were angrily shouting at each other in the local synagogue when one of them cried out, I'll rip you to pieces with my bare hands. The Baal Shem Tov, who was in the synagogue at the time, told his disciples to form a circle, each taking the hand of his neighbor, and to close their eyes. Rabbi Israel himself closed the circle by placing his hand upon the shoulders of the two disciples who stood to his right and his left. Suddenly the disciples cried out in fright. Behind their closed eyelids, they saw an angry man actually tearing his fellow apart, just as he had threatened. Oh, God.
So this story is him showing them that in a spiritual way, when someone tells his friend, I'll tear you apart, he literally is in a spiritual way doing it at the time. And the Baal Shem Tov showed the students, and I believe in the original it said tearing him apart like a fish. It showed an image. They saw something and it made them scream, seeing this fellow that said this curse actually tearing his friend apart like the way you would tear a fish apart. It wasn't just that the Baal Shem Tov made it up. He was saying, you're just unaware of what's really happening because of the power of your speech. You're just on the other side and you don't see it, but it's extremely truthful as to this is what's happening. And if you're aware of it, you'll be so much more careful as to what you say when you let out your anger, when you let out your frustration. Let's use that statement that this fellow said in the video right before this. And I want to hear from you guys. Let's pull it up over here on the screen. Starting with Layla, if you can read the statement and finish off how you think it should be said.
Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words can destroy me or give me life.
Right. Beautiful. Okay. Layla, Elia, if you can share, what would you say?
Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words can also break me, or I don't know, something like how Layla said.
Right. Okay, you agree? Sterny? You have another?
But words can hurt even more.
Right, that's true, because as much as stones and sticks can hurt, after a day or two you get over it, words can stay in someone for a lifetime. Sheila, would you have any way to add to this?
No, just that sometimes words, like you said before, words could be more powerful because it'll, especially if you say it at the moment and they hear it.
Yeah. Yes, 100%. So what I would say is, my input would be, there's a difference what we should tell ourselves and a difference what we should think regarding others. Meaning, for yourself, if you want to say, I don't want someone else's words to break me, and you can really live that way, that is beautiful. You should tell yourself, someone else's words will never break me. I don't want someone else's bad day and then letting out frustration, which is usually not about me, but about them going through a hardship in their life. And therefore, anyone that cut them in the store and didn't say, I'm sorry the right way, they blow up. It's usually about them. Of course, I should tell myself, I don't want anybody else's negativity or their lack of happiness in their own life I don't want to accept their trash. I'm not a garbage collector, that everyone that has something negative, they throw it on me and I say, sure, bring it on. I'll make it part of my life. But when it comes to someone else, I should say, like all you were saying, of course I should say, if I wouldn't throw sticks and stones at the person, would I ever share with them words that are not affirmative, that are not going to make them happy, that are not going to be powerful and be remembering in a positive light? Myself, I shouldn't accept other people's trash, but I should never give someone else trash and say, oh, it's just words. There's a really powerful story. A woman shared this. She was a Holocaust survivor. Her parents were taken away from them and put in another cart when they were sent to Auschwitz. And she was with her younger brother. They were shoved in like cattle. I'm sure you guys have read similar stories. And she was put into the cart with her brother, and it was chaotic to get in. And once they're in the cart and it starts traveling, they all thought, of course, that they're going to Auschwitz, where they're going to just be in a temporary place where they're going to be safe because the war is breaking out. No one thought that they're going to be perished and killed. Well, a lot of people didn't know. She comes into the cart and everybody was schlepping their suitcases and their stuff, convinced that they're moving on to another city. She notices that her brother lost his shoes. And this whole chaotic pushing onto the cart, his shoes fell off and he lost it. So she is berating her brother. She was a young girl as well. And she says, what are you, so irresponsible? Why can't you keep your shoes on? What are we going to do? We're going to get there. We're not going to be able to walk around. Where am I going to buy you new shoes? Who said we have the money? I don't know if there's a store there. And she was letting out all of her anxiety from this whole situation onto her brother. And her brother got really upset. He closed off from her. They didn't talk the rest of the ride. They got off at Auschwitz. And she said, that was the last words I shared with my brother. And she said, for the rest of my life, I told myself, I'm not just going to be a victim and say this is terrible. But she said, every time I meet someone and I share something with them, I say, if this were to be the last words I would share with this person, what would those words be? Because with my brother, I never thought that would be the case. But whenever I leave someone, I share with them positive words that if it was the last time I ever speak with them, I want them to remember the most beautiful words ever. And we have that so many times when it comes to the end of someone's life. We had that with Twin Towers, people in the tower calling up their loved ones. And everybody always calls up and says, I love you, I'm so sorry, I miss you. No one ever calls up and says, by the way, I just want to let you know all the negative things I think about you. Before I die, I need to make sure you know that I really don't appreciate X, Y, and Z. No one thinks of that because when it really matters, they said, I know how powerful my words will be to them. When it comes to positive words, everybody wants to make sure I could get in my last few words to my loved one. You might say, tell yourself, what do you mean? It's just words. Is it going to make them healthier? You think sharing positive words is going to make you be saved by the Twin Towers? You're going to die anyways. It's just words. But yet when it comes to the positive at the last moment, we all wake up and say, of course, it's so powerful. I want my loved one for years to come to say, you know what the last words he told me were? Because it does mean a lot. But when it comes to negative words, we're so quick sometimes at sharing things that we say, oh, I just need to say it right now and I'll get over with it. And later on, I'll share something positive. Who knows if there will be another time when you could share something positive? Ask yourself, do I ever want to be saying these words to that person? If I don't want to be saying it to them, I don't want them remembering it at good times, I shouldn't share it at bad times. If you don't want your son or daughter or brother or mother or husband or spouse to remember any words at any point of their life, meaning if you don't want them to always live with it, never tell it to them. Because you don't know for how long they're going to live with it. You might live with it for 5 seconds, they might live with it forever. So it's extremely difficult once someone is aware of this, how much we have to be careful with our mouth and how much we have to look back and say, there's so many things throughout our lives and our day that I share. But even if we can't conquer it all, if we are just aware of it and try to be more on top of it by saying, I don't want to ever share with someone something that I don't want them to remember forever. Or if this is the last thing I was to share with them, then we shouldn't say it even now. Let's pull up in the student book the next point about speech. And Stern, if you'd like to read, well, one last thing over here, stay away from lies. it's just telling us a little bit again about speech, how difficult it is and how bad it is, where the Torah never says by any one of the other sins, distance yourself from it. It doesn't say distance yourself from murder, distance yourself from not believing in God, distance yourself from transgressing the Shabbat. Even the most sacred sins or commandments, it doesn't say distance yourself. Only one, it says distance yourself, and that is falsehood, which says a lot about two things. It says a lot about lies, and it also says a lot about speech, how detrimental speech can be, that God wants us to stay far away from it. He doesn't just say don't say a lie. He says go far away from it. Like one of the examples the Talmud gives is even to give off false impressions are prohibited. If a man needs a witness to come and testify in his behalf, and he tells you, I know you don't know any testimony, and I would never ask you to lie, but I want you to come to court, and I'll say, I have my witness over here in the stand, and I'll point at you, and my opponent will think that I have a witness, and then he'll admit, because I know that he knows I have a witness, I just don't actually have the witness. So if you come and give off the impression that you're going to testify, don't ever lie. I'm asking you a favor, can you do it for me? Torah law prohibits that. It says, because you're getting close to a lie. You're coming too close to the idea of lying. So even though you say, I'm not going to lie, but I'm just going to make as if I'm about to lie, even that is a prohibition. Okay, let's continue over here with the next point, Mirror, if you can read it.
If speech is an expression of our thoughts and feelings, what does it say about us? What we say reflects greatly on who we are. It is the way others will get to know us. Perhaps of less importance, but equally as true, your speech reflects greatly upon yourself.
Yeah, and as we said before, light travels faster than sound, and therefore some people seem bright until you hear them speak. Speech gives a person a mirror as to who we are deep inside. The way someone talks, the expressions they use, tells us a lot about the person. That's how you can get a channel to see inside of them. So it's not in a way of judging them, but it's in a way of someone working on themselves and saying, how I speak says a lot about my character. Let's read over here a quote from Maimonides where he brings up this exact idea. Layla, if you'd like to read Mishneh Torah.
Speech reflects who you are. Just as the wise man is recognized through his wisdom and his temperaments, and in these he stands apart from the rest of the people, so too he should be recognized through his actions, in his eating, drinking, intimate relations, in personal affairs, in his speech.
So the highlight is in his speech. A wise man speaks differently than a fool. That's important to realize. The way we speak not is just about hiding who we are, but rather realize that it reflects on who we are. And if I find myself speaking in a negative way, it's not other people's fault. It's usually just reflection of what's going on inside of me. If I find myself getting angry at other people, never blame, I'm not an angry guy. That person gets me angry. That's not true. If you're letting out negative speech when you get angry, it has something to do with you. That person can do the same thing to someone else and they won't get angry. So protecting our speech is about working on ourselves. And let's read the next quote over here, which is a verse from Job and then from the Talmud. Eliyav, if you'd like to read.
Speech as work. Yet man is born for toil. Rabbi Elazar says, every man was created for labor. As it is stated, man is born for toil. Job 5:7. Based on this verse, I do not know whether he was created for the toil of the mouth, speech, or whether he was created for the toil of labor. When the verse states, for his mouth presses upon him, Proverbs 16:26, you may say that he was created for toil for the mouth. And still, I do not know with regard to the toil of the mouth, whether it is for the toil of Torah or for the toil of conversation. When the verse states, this Torah scroll shall not depart from your mouth, Joshua 1:8, you must say that he was created for the toil of Torah.
So part of the reason why we were created to toil is the toil of speech, which means to use our speech for good things, for positive things, to connect with God, to study God's Torah, and to teach it on to others. And let's read the next quote. Sheila, if you'd like to read over here. Let me scroll up here a second. Okay. Sheila, can you see it?
Who?
Yeah, Sheila, if you'd like to read. Misuse. Yeah.
The Book of Education, Mitzvah 70. The negative commandment of blessing, a euphemism for cursing. The name of Hashem is from the roots of the commandment of blessing, the name that is empty, that it empties out of the man from any good. Through this bad speech, and all the glory of his soul becomes something destructive, and he is considered like the animals. As it is with this exact thing through which God separated him for the good, and with it man was created, and that is speech, and through which he is separated from the animals, that he is separating himself to evil, and he extracts himself completely from any parameter of knowledge and become like a disgusting and repulsive creeping animal, and lower than it. And therefore the Torah warns us about this, since the good God will desire our good, and each and every word that causes for denial of good to a person goes against God's desire. May he be blessed.
So he explains here, the prohibition of cursing God is not because God is worried on his own insecurity that everybody needs to praise him, but it's for our good, because speech is powerful. And by cursing God, we distance ourselves from God, which is making ourselves not be the best that we can be. We start becoming like an animal, or even worse, because we were given a beautiful gift of speech, but using it negatively makes us more destructive or more distant from God and from our true self than an animal can ever get. So to abuse speech is to be unhuman. Using speech is the best way a human can be human. When we abuse speech, which means saying negative things, sharing gossip, speaking with curse words or things that are not appropriate, is making ourselves not be completely the way we should. The next step is about silence. And Layla, if you'd like to read over here, E, till the bottom of the page.
Sometimes it's better to say nothing at all. Staying silent can be good for our health, our relationships, and good for the other person. So powerful is speech that, like nuclear energy, our sages felt that when in doubt, better without. Blabber and reckless talk is as one who fools around, who shoots arrows and death and says, I'm just playing. Only when we are certain that it is guided and harnessed should it be expressed, and even then, calculatedly.
Very good. So for those that speak foolishly and they speak just gossip and they say, oh, I'm not doing anything, I'm just sharing random information. When there is no reason to speak, you'll be always better off being quiet. As the Talmud says, that those that are extremely loud and talkative and always making a noise, it's like one coin in a jug makes a lot of noise. But when you have multiple coins filling up the jug, if the jug is full, it doesn't make so much noise. When someone's brain and someone's life is filled with positivity, it doesn't make so much noise. But one that is just blabbering and sharing when it's not necessary, it's usually because not that their brain is filled with information, but usually because there's too much empty space. As we'll see here, another quote from Pirkei Avot, which again, I guess we'll give Layla the right to read it. Ethics from Our Fathers, chapter 1, verse Mishnah 17.
Silence is golden. Shimon, his son, used to say, all my days I grew up among the sages, and I found nothing better for a person than silence. Study is not the most important thing, but actions. Whoever indulges in too many words brings about sin.
Very good. So he says here, nothing Can you imagine someone says, I found nothing better for a person than silence? That's an extremely powerful statement. And then he finishes off with the opposite, that whoever indulges in too many words brings about sin. You'll never lose out by being more silent and listening. As they say, whenever you talk, you're just sharing something you already knew. If you're silent, you have the ability to actually listen and hear something new that you didn't know. So it's a wise person that shares a little and listens a lot, and it's the fool that shares a lot and listens very limited. As we'll see over here, this quote from Maimonides. Sheila, if you'd like to read Maimonides' Mishnah Torah.
One should always cultivate silence and refrain from speaking, except with regard to matters of knowledge or things that are necessary for his physical welfare. It was said that Rav, the discipline of our saintly teacher, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, never uttered an idle word in all his days, which is what the conversation of most people consist of. One should not speak at length, even about matters involving one's physical needs. On this point, our sages commanded us and said, whoever speaks at length brings on sin. They also said, I have found nothing better for one's person than silence. Similarly, when speaking about matters of Torah or knowledge, one's words should be brief, but rich in content. This is what the sages commanded with their statement. One should always teach his students with brevity. In contrast, if one's words are many of the content scant, that it's foolishness, of which Ecclesiastes 5:2 states, the dream comes from the multitude of subjects and the voice of a fool with the multitude of words. Oh, that's good.
Yeah, so he says here that a fool speaks with many words. As they say, if you don't understand the subject, you need a lot of time to talk about it because you don't really know what you're saying. If you really know a subject well, you can summarize it in very short words that contain a lot of information. As someone I was learning with last week, he said from, I forgot his name now, the Prime Minister of the UK during Second World War, famous name, slipped my mind. So he said that if he needs to talk about a subject and he has many hours to talk about it, he doesn't need a lot of time to prepare. But if you give him just 15 minutes to talk about a subject, he needs many days to prepare. Because in 15 minutes, you have to really give a precise summary, means you really got to know what you're talking about. If someone's explaining something on and on, usually means they don't really understand it themselves. Let's show here one last clip, a video, and then we'll get to our key points, the summary at the end. So there was a rabbi that was explaining how everything in the world teaches us a lesson in our service to God. So someone asked him, what can we learn from the typewriter? And he said, from the telegram. Telegram was before emails and text. You had to pay per letter what you want to send a message to abroad or to anywhere else in the country. You have to pay per letter. So people would make really short messages with like skipping out vowels just to give over the basic information, the equivalent of an email, but just expensive. So he said, we learned from the telegram that every single letter matters. Every single letter that you say makes a difference and it costs money. Either for the good, you get rewarded for it, or you have to pay for it. No such thing as, oh, I just shared extra stuff, but it's no harm. But everything costs money. Every aspect that we share in our life is actually has a value to it. And he went on, he gave other examples, like what do we learn from the train? That sometimes if you're 1 second late, you can miss it all. That was a side point. Let's get on to our key points, summarizing the class. I'd love to hear what you guys have each learned from this class. You could also share not related to these key points if there's something unique that this class has taught you. But we'll start with Layla, if you'd like to read point number 1.
Speech is one of the features that is characteristic of and defines humans. I think, yeah, and that's also like has to do with how speech is a reflection of humans' much higher intelligence than other animals. But we learned that speech is more important and powerful than intelligence. I don't really know how to expand on this one.
Right. But. Mm-hmm. Okay. So the point over here is that what makes us human is our speech. So if you use your speech properly, then you're being human. If you use your speech improperly, you're acting like an animal. This is, in other terms, my interpretation. But either way, go on, Elia, for point number 2.
Man's ability to communicate through speech is reflective of a higher form of intelligence. Like you said, humans have a different form of intelligence and we have special abilities of speech. So that's why we need to be smart with what we say.
Right. Yeah, and we said animals, as much as they communicate, it's just for self-preservation, versus a human can do a lot more of communicating with someone else, not at someone else, barking, but rather to make a relationship, make a connection. Okay, point number 3, Shtarni.
Speech gives us the ability to reach beyond our own existence. We could like reflect ideas off of other people and listen to what they have to say, and yeah.
Right. Yeah, beautiful, because our minds can just share what we already know, versus speech allows us to join forces together and be above of just our own self, but rather hear and give over from other people and learn a lot more. Okay, point number 4, Sheila.
Like God's word, speech has the ability to create and destroy. Well, just like now, people keep telling the same lies over and over again. Enough people will believe it and it will destroy things. I mean, look at Hitler, look at Trump.
Yeah.
You keep telling the same thing over and over, people believe it.
They say while the lie makes its way halfway around the world, truth is still busy tying his shoes.
Exactly.
Lies can spread very quickly. People thrive off it. It gets all the attention it needs. It gets pushed always to the front of the line. But you're right. The power of speech is a divine given power. We don't even realize it, how much of a beauty and a gift it is, where God says, I want you to become like me in creating. It gives us the ability to be so much above everything else in the world, but unfortunately it can be used just like any powerful force, like nuclear energy can be used to power buildings and cities, and it can also be used to destroy cities. Okay, next point, Layla.
like God's words. So,
No, the next one.
speech must be very calculated. So you should think, because speech and your words are so powerful, either for good or bad, you just should calculate them or think very, very carefully before you say anything. And
Yeah.
silence is also really good sometimes.
Yes, that's true. And like we said, the story of the woman from the Holocaust, where she said that her lesson was, every time I speak to someone, I want it to be, if this was the last communication I had with them, I want them to remember something positive, because she felt so terrible how her brother went away in this world being upset, feeling rejected by her own sister, as if there weren't enough Nazis around that hated him, that he also needs his sister to let out her anger on him. Okay, Elia, last point.
The Torah has guidelines that help us speak ethically, constructively, and with dignity. So, like, if we listen to what the Torah says and we see what God's intentions for us are and what we say, what we do, then we can be better at communicating with others. And yeah.
Right. Meaning the Torah prohibits us from gossiping, from sharing negative information, from lying, says distance ourselves. The Torah doesn't say freedom of speech, do as you please, say whatever you want as long as you don't hurt me. Torah says you're hurting me already with your speech, and be very careful. God is giving us rules of speech not in a way to limit us, but to bring out the best and allow us to be a full human. He says, let me teach you, just like you have a healthy diet, you should have a healthy speech, healthy things that you do say and don't say. Beautiful. Thank you all for joining. It was a pleasure learning this together with you, and we will see you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi. Bye.
My pleasure. Bye-bye.